The meeting at the Fraser Methodist Church came about because some of the concerned Broadmoor apartment residents wanted answers to many questions to the Montgomery County Health Department's plan to decontaminate a large bird roost that is determined to be a dangerous source of histoplasmosis, an infectious fungus. County health officials told the residents that the decontamination would be in the form of spraying a formaldehyde solution on the thick canebrake, home of an estimated 250,000 blackbirds. Evacuation was strongly suggested to people living within 200 feet of the roost, and possible evacuation to those within a distance beyond 200 feet, but less than 1,200. Spraying was also said to be undertaken no earlier than April 15th, and at least a week's notice would be provided to residents. The cost of the chemicals involved will be absorbed by the landmark residents who live the closest. The spraying equipment will be provided by the City of Montgomery, and any possible housing for evacuees will be considered by the local Red Cross. Landmark residents voiced concern over delays brought on by the Broadmoor resident skepticism, but were told by the apartment residents that their questions had been adequately answered. Montgomery police have said that about a dozen of their men have been tested for the disease, so that those who show signs of immunity can be called on to protect the area during the decontamination time period. Health officials say the formaldehyde solution can cause reddening of the eyes and a slight skin rash, but they also point out that these reactions were minimal when another East Montgomery area was decontaminated last year. The greatest effect comes from the solution's odor, which is said to be strong. Health officials say this bird roost is one of 3 considered to be real problem areas in Montgomery County. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
The State Finance Department followed the lead of the governor's office and proposed an overall budget decrease of almost 9.5%. Budget Officer James Rayford told the committee they will need $4.6 million next year to operate, opposed to this year's $5.1 million budget. He pointed out that not all of this is state money. Only $4.1 million of next year's budget would come from the state's general fund. The rest would be federal money. Rayford said the Finance Department has 267 employees, with a reduction of 7 in the Service Division planned for next year. The Revenue Department was next. Director Ralph Egerton said they needed $17.6 million for next year. This is the same amount as the current budget. Egerton said they were unable to cut back because 25 additional auditors were hired. At one point, the state income tax forms were discussed. Some committee members complained the forms were too complicated. Egerton said they were being worked on. The Office of Consumer Protection came before the committee proposing a budget of about 18% lower than the current one. The office's legal advisor said the reduction came about because they were operating without the top 3 administrators. The Board of Corrections was to have made its presentation, but Representative Brooks Hines, chairman of the Prison Oversight Committee, said his committee was half through with its study of the prisons and would prefer the Board of Corrections to wait. Acting Prison Commissioner Larry Bennett had prepared a statement on the corrections budget for next year. They would have been requesting $18.1 million from the general fund out of a total budget of almost $30 million. The budget presentation for the Board of Corrections was rescheduled for April 12th, the last day of the budget hearings. It's possible that between now and then, some of the figures in the preliminary presentation will be changed. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News at the Capitol.
Both educators and legislators attended the luncheon. House of Representatives Speaker Joe McCorkadale presented the awards, and Governor James' executive assistant on education told the group that educators must stop fighting for funds like dogs scrapping over a bone. He said for the time being, emphasis must be placed on elementary education.
We can look at the facts, and the facts tell us that in Alabama, in order to assure a better future for the state, in order to assure a brighter future for post-secondary education, we must put some emphasis for a time on our primary schools.
Lager said as long as there are counties where 8th graders read on a 4th grade level, Alabama will not move forward. Former Governor Wallace wished the new governor well in his educational endeavors. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News reporting.
All year I was swimming the 500, and the 500 and the 50 both fall on the same day at NC2As, and about 3 days before SECs, Coach Quick put me in the 50. And
It was a fortuitous event, huh?
right, I didn't think I'd be swimming it at all, you know, during the year, you know, maybe in a couple dual meets, but at NC2As I thought I'd be swimming the 500. But I thought that during the year I just trained so hard for the 200, I don't think I was ready for the 500.
Did you surprise yourself by beating Cone and everybody in that?
Yes, sir. When I got to NC2As, my goal was just to get top 6. And once I had done that, I just hoped it, you know, maybe move up. I was seated like 5th, and, you know, I was hoping maybe 4th or 3rd, but I had no idea I'd win it. I didn't think that I had a shot in the world.
The pot of gold at the end of that rainbow is the national championship. What does Auburn have to do next year or the next to attain it?
We're about 2 or 3 men away from winning the national championship. We need to land a real good breaststroker. We were 4th in the medley relay, and you have to win that event. Then we need to get one more sprint freestyler and probably a pretty good individual medley man, and I think, and then have everybody else that's on the team returning, because we return every single point we scored, have them swim to their full potential. If we're hitting on all cylinders next year, we could be the champion.
The Teachers and Employees Retirement Boards of Control met in joint session today to discuss the dual role of David Bronner. Governor James was there in his capacity as chairman of the Employees Board, but State School Superintendent Dr. Wayne Teague presided in his capacity as chairman of the Teachers Board. James spoke to the board saying he could see no monetary conflict in Bronner holding both positions. Most of the board members did not seem concerned about the dual role, but Dr. Paul Hubbard and another board member, Vernon St. John, were worried about any precedent being set for future administrations. When it came time for the vote, both boards decided by a majority to let Bronner remain as Secretary-Treasurer of the retirement systems of Alabama. Afterwards, Bronner indicated he was ready to get down to work.
Well, the plans are now basically just to, as Governor James said, to go to work, and we're going to try to get the budgets over the next 2 weeks up to the legislature.
Do you plan to utilize any of your RSA staff in the finance department?
Not at this particular time. The only utilization that we had before was a individual by the name of John Papanassis who came over and helped me the first few days.
Dr. Bronner has overcome what he calls another hurdle in the approval by the Retirement Board of Control of the teachers and employees of his dual role, but he may face yet another hurdle, a potentially larger one, and that is a court suit. Dennis Latham, WSFA TV News.
This is another area that we're going to have to be vitally concerned with in Alabama as we go and look to nuclear power for generating electricity here in this state. And I think that it's going to fall not only to the federal people for inspection, but we're going to have some state inspection of these nuclear power plants.
Well, the egg inspection. Used to, you'd break an egg in a cup before you put it, you get wholesome meat and poultry when you go to what have you. We bring these samples into our lab, test it for octane, a little revenue sharing money. So, how many people do we have working in that laboratory that diagnose diseases of the animals in the state of Alabama by farmers? We'll have one veterinarian. Do we have no, I think we need increases other place more than we question is foreign investors buying agricultural land. It's not much of a problem in the state of Alabama. In other states, Florida and a good bit in Georgia, and I understand Arkansas and Texas, it has jumped up pretty big. We ran up a figure on that recently. How much?
We would like to first be sure the Alabamians see Alabama, and this may be the best time to do it if we have a gas shortage. We'd also like to tap into that international market. I do feel this is a very viable market and that we can tap into it. I'd also like to hit for the specialized conventions, the national conventions of clubs or organizations, the international conventions. Alabama's a great place to have those conventions, and we would like the opportunity to show people that set up these conventions that we can handle it.
This shows whether or not the student is doing it properly. We didn't have it turned on recording while I was doing it. It tells you about the depth of compression, the volume.
Now, we do try to arrange to do some classes for special interest groups. We do classes for special interest groups.
For the second day in a row, the Carver baseball team has lost to Charles Henderson High School of Troy. Yesterday, the Wolverines were defeated 13-3, the game played in Troy. And today, here in Montgomery, it was closer, but Carver was still on the losing end. Troy won it by a score of 1-0. After today's loss, Carver dropped to 3-6 on the season, while Troy is now 2-0. James Spann, WSFA TV Sports.
The Montgomery County District Attorney's Office sent out some 70 letters explaining just what the Sunshine Law is. The Sunshine Law, Section 13-5-1, Code of Alabama, specifically prohibits secret meetings by certain agencies.
There is an exception under this law that if this agency or board is dealing with a matter of personnel, something to do with an individual's reputation.
Ms. Ellen Brooks, Assistant Montgomery County District Attorney.
Any state, county, or city agency, board, or commission, and it goes on to name a few of them specifically, that has some kind of financial, legislative, or judicial function must hold open meetings. That is, the public can attend their meetings. And if they fail to, then they are subject to a criminal sanction. That is, they could be found guilty of a misdemeanor.
Ms. Brooks says a June 1978 Montgomery County grand jury instructed the DA's office to issue the letter. The office has since been researching just how many agencies and departments do fall under the secret meeting law. Ms. Brooks points out that the law is by no means a new idea.
It was passed in 1915 by a state legislature, so it's not a symptom of the Watergate era or anything of that nature, and it's been around with us since that time. It has been changed a little bit as agencies have come and gone, so to speak, but basically it is the same law with the same punishment.
Even though the grand jury issued a call for that letter, Ms. Brooks says there have been several inquiries by both county and state agencies for a description of the law and a little bit of clarification for what it means. That would lead one to believe that state agencies and county agencies are somewhat concerned about violating the law. Above all of that, since the law was enacted in 1915, Ms. Brooks says there have been very few violations and convictions of the law. At the county courthouse, Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Well, insofar as the decision of the boards, I think that's final. In terms of any other controversy, I'm aware of none. So I have to assume that that would be over.
Is the decision that was reached yesterday one that you agree with?
Obviously, I didn't agree with it because I voted against the majority decision, but I have to live with the majority decision and intend to do so. I think there was room for doubt. I think there is a possibility of conflict, and believing that, I had to vote my convictions.
The possibility of a lawsuit, could that enter into whether or not Dr. Bronner would be, quote, suspended or stepped down from one of the two positions until the lawsuit may be cleared up?
Well, I have no knowledge of a lawsuit, so I wouldn't speculate on that because not knowing anything about one being planned, I have heard rumors, but I know of no action being planned by anyone, so I couldn't speculate on that.
requires that the request come from the person. And we'll hold to the letter and the spirit of the law.
What is your personal opinion of the death penalty?
I'm prepared to support the laws of the state of Alabama, and we have the death penalty. I support the death penalty. I think there's been a miscommunications there. What we've asked the colleges to do, very plain. We've said, we think you can operate next year, manage your budget on 10% less of state funds. Now give us a clear, concise operating statement. And, you know, we said try 10% of state funds. Well, there are federal funds there equivalent to state funds, and when you put all of that together, in reality, it may be a 2 or 3% decrease. And I find that there seems to be, and maybe I haven't made my position clear in requesting for full disclosure of financial information in language that people can understand.
It appears inevitable gasoline will soon cost $1 a gallon. An Altoona, Pennsylvania company called Veeder-Root that makes the machine inside the gas pumps that tells you how much to pay is already shipping new machines that read $1 and more a gallon. They are already planning a machine that reads $2 per gallon, just in case. Although gas prices here in Montgomery, like the rest of the South, are generally below other sections of the country, they are rapidly catching up. Several gas distributors have recently increased their prices, and naturally, those prices are passed along to the motorist. Many stations are facing gasoline allocations, and shorter operating hours are becoming a reality. There may soon be other stations around Montgomery, like this one, who will be forced to close at least one day of the week because they ran out of gas. Michael Jones.
It looked like just another annual banquet of the business leaders organization, Downtown Unlimited. Many of Montgomery's most prominent leaders were there. And when Mayor Fulmer began to speak, he talked of the city's advancement in the past 21 years. Then he announced that he had just received a telegram from the Government Services Administration. The telegram said the GSA is going ahead with plans to renovate Union Station.
But the bottom line will be that it will be refurbished to its original glory, to its original grandizement, and to the end that it will be filled with office space and with all kinds of either restaurant, boutiques, or various and sundry business spaces that will tend to enhance our downtown area.
The mayor called the telegram a giant step toward revitalization of the downtown area. Governor Fob James praised the mayor's efforts. And though the Union Station deal has been discussed for a long time, the mayor's announcement was a big surprise. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News, reporting. When this train derailed in Youngstown, Florida, chlorine gas leaked out, killing several persons before they could run away from the gas. Railroads carry 1,600 types of potentially lethal chemicals. And yet, when a train derailed less than 2 weeks ago in Montgomery, hundreds of curiosity seekers swarmed to the site.
When the first company arrived on the scene, Engine 8, they estimated there'd be over 200 people on and around this particular derailment. And at that time, we hadn't classified what had turned over, what type of chemicals that could be dangerous. And fortunately, there was none that was dangerous to the general public at that time. But Should that have been LP gas or chlorine or something of this nature, we could have lost in excess of 1,500 to 2,000 people there in just a matter of a few minutes by people being curious and wanting to see what's happened.
Chief Odom says persons in the area of a derailment should be preparing to make an orderly evacuation away from the area rather than flocking toward it. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News reporting.
Danny Thorne sustained injuries to his right leg when it was pinned between two railroad cars in this yard off of Louisville Street. Thorne was taken to Baptist Hospital and admitted in satisfactory condition. His injuries were not described as serious. He was working on the connection between the cars, one a wrecker car headed for this train derailment in Verbena on Highway 31. 13 cars of an L&N train derailed close to the heart of this small Chilton County town. No one was injured in the accident, which happened at 7:25 this morning. The derailment was reported to have been caused by a malfunctioning brake on one of the derailed hopper cars. The train was traveling about 25 miles per hour at the time. The 138-car train was bound for Birmingham from Montgomery. The remainder of the cars were sent on to Birmingham after being disconnected from the wreckage. Insulation and copper wire was strewn around the derailment. L&N officials say there were no dangerous materials on board. Several trucks began arriving from Montgomery to take cargo back for inspection. An L&N supervisor says it will probably be 6 o'clock Sunday morning before the tracks are reopened. Michael Jones, WSFA TV News, Verbena.
John Lewis Evans has said repeatedly he would rather die in the electric chair than face life imprisonment. So he may not appreciate the efforts of the American Civil Liberties Union. Today, the ACLU released data that a person who kills a white person is 16 times more likely to wind up on death row than if he murdered a black person. Evans' victim was white. Alabama's ACLU president admits the release of those figures just a few days before Evans' scheduled execution is not pure coincidence.
We are not asking for a stay of the execution of Evans directly. We're not directly asking for that stay. However, I think that your listeners and readers could draw their conclusion about what this means. If we have a moratorium on executing people, then that would be a moratorium on executing Evans, and that would require some specific sort of action on the part of the governor.
Bray has asked for the moratorium until officials explain what he calls racial bias in the criminal justice system. Lisa Nielsen, WSFA TV News reporting.
A tangled web of litigation carried on into another day as Alabama Power Company continued its fight for higher rates. Earlier this year, the utility asked the Public Service Commission for an emergency rate increase of 33%. The commission, however, only gave them 9.5%. Two appeals of the rate case were then filed, one by the Legal Services Corporation, alleging that secret meetings were held between the governor, House and Senate members, the PSC, and Alabama Power Company, secret meetings that resulted in the 9.5% rate increase. The other appeal was filed by the utility itself, claiming that 9.5% increase was not enough to make ends meet. In addition to the appeals in the 15th Judicial Circuit Court, the Power Company filed motions with the Public Service Commission for a rehearing of the emergency case. That, however, was cut short at the April PSC meeting.
The Commission didn't make a decision on it today because of an appeal of the emergency order to the Circuit Court, and under a Supreme Court decision, the same matter can't be resting in two courts at the same time.
Over in Circuit Court, Alabama Power Company was trying to become a party in the Legal Services Corporation fight for a restraining order on that 9.5% emergency increase. The Power Company holding that since the case involves them, they should at least be represented in the case. Judge Phelps agreed based on a 1974 Supreme Court ruling on a similar case. Judge Phelps then set a hearing date for Friday to rule on all other pending motions. While the legal hassling over the 9.5% temporary rate increase continues, both sides are gearing up for even more hearings on a permanent rate increase, which are tentatively scheduled to begin April 16th. At the county courthouse, Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
He has notified Mr. Larry Bennett that this has happened and has told Mr. Bennett that he will be given every opportunity to be employed within the system if he cares to do so. He also expressed his gratitude to Mr. Bennett for his work during the interim period.
When will Mr. Britton start?
He'll be in town tomorrow morning. He'll start work tomorrow.
Will the governor then relinquish more of his control to Britton, or how long will the court receivership last?
Well, the receivership's for a period of 1 year, and Mr. Britton will work directly under the governor. He will be given quite a bit of latitude to do what the receivership, the petition said he would do, and the governor hopefully will not have to take as major a role as he has taken in that whole prison situation.
The Rebels are having a real good spring, James. I know, it's early to say what kind of club we're going to have, but spring training will give you an indication of what kind of personnel you're going to have. And it seems like the real strong points for the Rebels this year is going to be excellent speed in the outfield and infield, excellent speed on the bases, very, very strong pitching, and good average hitting. I don't know if we're going to be hitting for the fences or not, but I know we're going to have some strong 300 hitters on this club.
How about some individuals who have done well so far in spring?
The ones that have really impressed Detroit, from what they have told me, are infielders Marty Castillo at third base, Ted Dason at short, and Bob Nandon at second. These guys played full seasons last year at Lakeland. Each one hit about 280, and it really looks like they're going to be earmarked for Montgomery. It's still early to tell yet. There still has to be one more cut from the Evansville roster at AAA, and then we'll have a better idea of who's going to be making our club and who we're going to have to send down to Lakeland.
When do you think the rosters are going to be set finally?
I can figure that we'll know something in about a week. By then they'll have made a decision of which players are going to be going where, and it's to our advantage to wait as long as possible, because at that point Denny Summers, our manager, and Jim Leland, the manager at Evansville, will sit down and try to give each roster the best players possible.
Let's talk about the opening date. I guess it's about 2.5 weeks away now. What plans do you have for that?
Well, of course, we got Governor Fob James coming out and Mayor Falmer to come out to share the duties of throwing out the first pitch of the season. And we'll have Billy Hitchcock, the Southern League president, coming out. Festivities on Friday night are scheduled to start at 6:30, pregame festivities, and then we'll kick off the season at 7:30 against Charlotte.